Good morning, children. I hope you have seen the previous video where I have discussed about the flexible constitution, the definition of the constitution and the kinds. Though I have the video which I have ended with which kind of constitution, I have ended the video with the flexible constitution. In this video, obviously this video is in continuation with the previous video. I'm going to start with the flexible constitution. Though I did only the definition. Here I'm going to tell you about the merits and demerits of flexible constitution and later on other kinds of constitution as well. So let's start. Now, the kinds. Now, the very first of all, in kinds, I'm going to tell you about the merits and demerits of a flexible constitution. So, this way, a sort of revision can be given, right? So, very first of all, I'm going to talk about the merits now. The merits. A major merit of the flexible constitution is its ability to change easily in accordance with the changes in the social and political environment of the society. The very first merit, children, be careful. Secondly, it is very helpful in meeting emergencies because it can be easily amended. It enables the government to undertake all its steps deemed essential for meeting the situation created by an emergency. Thirdly, because of its dynamic nature, there are less opportunity for revolt in the state. The constitution has the ability to keep pace with the changing time and in accordance with the changes in public opinion. Britain has been free from violent revolution also because of its flexible nature of its constitution. So here they have given the example of Britain also, and why frequent revolts doesn't take place in Britain because of its dynamic in nature, because the British constitution is dynamic in nature and they are flexible, right? The constitution is flexible. Whose constitution? The British constitution, and they can make changes whenever they want to. This way they can save their country from the revolt. Next, finally, since the flexible constitution keeps on developing with time, it always continues to be popular and remain fresh, right? Because it remains updated all the time. Very easily, the amendment can be done. So this constitution is one of the best, constitution, and maybe just because of the amendment, it keeps itself updated, right? Effectively mirrors the historical development which keep on coming in the society it serves. Clear, children? Let's come on to the demerits. First, a flexible constitution is very often a source of instability. Flexibility enables the government in power to give it a desired dress and content. Secondly, it is not suitable for a federation, right? This flexible constitution, always remember, children, is not suitable for the federation, right? In a federation, a flexible constitution can lead to undesirable, easy, and even unilateral changes in the constitution by the federal government or by the government of federating units. Everyone knows federal government only, they are good government and they are very much effectively, run in the big countries, right? So that means federal government means division of power among central and state government. Clear? And if this sort of constitution, that flexible constitution, is applied in this type of government, right, in these form of states like federal states, so it is literally, it gives undesirable results. Clear? Because it becomes very complicated. Next, if you see, a flexible constitution can be successful only when certain conditions are present in the environment, otherwise it becomes a source of instability. So maybe for that we have another options as well. How come it become a stable constitution, right? So few steps can be taken before applying this type of constitution in any country, right? The very first of all, it demands the presence of honest and mature leadership. Constitution, right? Immature leadership, like if you see, right, honest and mature leadership controlling the size of sovereign power. Immature leadership can use flexibility of the constitution for pursuing selfish and narrowly conceived goals. Most of the people of the state should be willing and active participants in politics. Only then can an a corrupted use of flexibility by the ruling party be prevented. So that means this type of constitution can only be worked, can be working under the effective leadership. Clear, children? And which form of states, which form of countries can have such kinds of constitution is the smaller countries, and if you see, these smaller countries can handle very well the flexible constitution. That means flexible constitution is not effective for the federal countries, right, or the big countries. Clear, children? So let's come on to the next slide now. Now, we have another kind of constitution, that we have rigid. Now, let's start. The rigid constitution is one which cannot be easily amended. Its method of amendment is difficult. For amended it, the legislature has to pass a proposal by a specific and a large majority of two-thirds, right, or an absolute majority of votes. For passing or amending an ordinary law, the legislature passes the measure by a simple majority of the members present. The constitutional law is considered the fundamental or supreme law of the land. It is regarded as the basic will of the sovereign people and hence can be amended only by a special procedure requiring the passing of amendment proposal by a big majority of votes followed by ratification by the people, right? That means followed by ratification by the states, the people in the referendum or any other such mechanism. That means indirectly they're trying to say they need the ratification of the states. So this is we are talking about the Indian constitution that cannot be easily amended, and legislature, children, here means the parliament. Clear? The parliament have to have a secured majority, then only this sort of constitution can easily amend. Right. Next, constitutional law is superior to ordinary law. If the ordinary law is in conflict with the constitutional law, it is rejected, right, by the court and it cannot remain operative. The parliament does not enjoy an unlimited power of constitutional amendment. It is limited by the provisions of the constitution. It's not like that, like parliament is, highest body of rules and regulations or making laws. So it doesn't mean that in rigid constitution they can make the amendment just like the way we have read in flexible constitution, right? It's very difficult. Parliament cannot enjoy supremacy over the constitution. There are some limited powers given to the parliament in regarding the amendment of the constitution. Clear, children? Now if you see, the rigid constitution is immune from statutory laws and easy amendment. It is mostly almost a written and enacted constitution and provides for a difficult method of amendment. It is free from any changes that can be made in unwritten and flexible constitution. That is why critics of rigid constitution regard it as being conservative and incapable of keeping pace with the changing time. However, in states with rigid constitution, conventions and several other informal and less strict ways often produce the necessary changes and keep the constitution updated with the changing social and political environment and needs. Clear, children? So if you see, the best example in the world is the US constitution, right? And it has been a very rigid constitution, and if you see, it has got only 27 amendments during the past 220 years of its life. Clear, children? And same goes with our constitution as well. Hardly 101st Amendment Act in the constitution tells about GST, goods and service tax. So usually our constitution also cannot be amended very easily. Clear, children? Now let's move on to merits of a rigid constitution. Now, in the rigid constitution, in this present slide, I have written the merits and demerits. Let me discuss you about the merits first. Merit of a rigid constitution. First, a rigid constitution is a source of stability in administration. Secondly, it maintains continuity in administration. It cannot become a tool in the hands of the party exercising the power of the state in a particular period of time, right? It's not like that it can be amended easily, the party can have a nice time. Here, because it cannot be amended easily, this rigid constitution, the party cannot enjoy, cannot use its arbitrary power. Clear, children? It prevent autocratic size of power by the government. Obviously government power should be in limits because the constitution cannot be amended easily. Right, children? And finally, if you see, a rigid constitution is ideal for federation. A rigid constitution, federation, like our country India, federation means division of power into two forms of government: central or union or state government. Clear, children? Now come on to demerits of a rigid constitution. Now the chief demerit of a rigid constitution is that it fails to keep pace with the fast changing socio-economic environment and needs. Like this sort of constitution cannot very easily update it itself. Why? Because amendment is very difficult. Now secondly, because of its inability to change easily, it hinders the process of social and political development. Might be possible the government wanted to do some development, but just because of its rigid nature, government cannot implement any kind of rules which leads to development. Thirdly, it can be a source of hindrance during emergency. Fourthly, its inability to change easily can lead to revolts against the government. Like few things public want to change, but they cannot make changes in the constitution, make amendments in the constitution. So might be it leads to revolts. Clear, children? Next, if you see, a rigid constitution is a source of conservativeness. It becomes old very soon and fails to keep pace with the time. That's why this sort of constitution is known as the conservative constitution, children. I hope so people have understood. Let's move on to another slide now. Now, Come on to evolved constitution, enacted constitution. Clear? So before coming on to evolved and enacted constitution, I'm moving back to the previous slide, and here I'm going to explain you a real difference between rigid and flexible constitution, children. Flexible I touched few part in the previous video, and flexible merits and demerits I've already explained in this video. So let me make you clear about the difference between the rigid and flexible constitution. So if you see the difference is what. So if you see, while discussing the difference between flexible and rigid constitution, we would like to disagree with the view which hold that a flexible constitution is an unwritten constitution and a rigid constitution is a written constitution. Clear, children? A flexible constitution can be written or unwritten and not necessarily an unwritten one. Likewise, a rigid constitution is not always a written constitution. Indian constitution is a written constitution, and yet it has been working as a flexible constitution with 102 amendments made till date. Britain has an unwritten constitution, and yet it has reflected a degree of rigidity in its operation. The passing of the first Reform Act 1832 became possibly only after a great deal of efforts involving securing of people's mandate in elections. Right, children? So as such, the difference between flexible and rigid constitution is not that of unwritten or written character, but in respect of the nature of their amending process. A flexible constitution can be amended easily, while a rigid constitution can be amended by a difficult process. In actual practice, a constitution works at times as a rigid constitution or a flexible constitution, and it depends upon the nature of distribution of political power at a given time. Right? If for example, the constitution of UK is flexible rather than most flexible constitution in the world, however, in reality, amendment making has been at times a difficult exercise. Dear children, likewise, Indian constitution has been relatively a rigid constitution because there is a definite procedure by which the constitution can be amended. Some of its part can be amended by a very difficult procedure as laid down in its Article 368. Clear, children? The US Constitution is a rigid constitution and only 27 amendments have been made in it till today. However, it has been continuously developing and changing with the help of several other means like congressional interpretation, presidential interpretation, judicial interpretation, and decisions and emergence of several conventions. Right? So thus in practice, any constitution can work as a rigid or as a flexible constitution. And if you see, a good constitution is neither very rigid nor very flexible. In fact, a good constitution must have both a certain degree of rigidity as well as an ability to change with the changing time. Excessive rigidity or excessive flexibility must always be avoided. A very rigid constitution, as for example the US Constitution, can be a source of slow pace of constitutional development. It has to be made capable of keeping pace with the changing time by depending upon some non-formal methods of amendments. Clear, children? Like conventions, legislative, executive, and judicial interpretation of their power and functions, and judicial decisions. Likewise, a very flexible constitution can be a source of instability and lead to frequent changes in the constitutional law of the state. Thus, a constitution should neither be too rigid nor too flexible. Now come on to evolved constitution and enacted constitution. Now let's start with evolved. What do you mean by evolving? An evolved constitution is one which is not made at any time by any assembly or persons or institution. It is the result of slow and gradual process of evolution. Its rules and principles draw binding force and strength from the fact of their being recognized as ancient, time-tested and respected customs and conventions. Some of these conventions stand recognized by law and hence become enforceable, while others are followed because of the sanctions of public opinion, practical utility, and moral consciousness in their favor. Such constitutions are the result of historical evolution and of ever-growing political needs of the people. The best example is Great Britain. Clear, children? Now come on to enacted constitution. As against evolved constitution, an enacted constitution is a man-made constitution. It is made, enacted and adopted by an assembly or a council or a constituent assembly made like a law after full discussion over its objectives, principles and provisions. The constituent assembly is constituted by the representatives of the people and it drafts and enacts the constitution. It is written in the form of a book and in a systematic and formal manner. It describes the process of organization of government and lays down the functions of its organ and other aspects of government. The Constitution of the USA, India, Japan, China, and most of other states are enacted constitution. So I hope so children, till here you people have understood the kinds of the constitution. Clear, children? Clear? So if you want, you can again refer to the previous video, right children, so that you can get everything clearly. Clear, children? Till then, thank you.